So just by way of just sort of laying that groundwork about definitions and how we're sort of, contextualizing what this presentation is about. So with that, I've asked, we've sort of agreed that Dr. Middleton would speak first.
Good morning, everybody. I guess
Good morning.
So I'm just going to speak, and if anybody wants to jump in or chime in, you can. I didn't prepare anything special. I'm kind of all PowerPointed out, to be honest with you. So we'll see how this goes. But for those that don't know, I'm teaching in the counseling education department. We teach the master's level as well as the doctoral students. And with the master's students, they're, trying to pursue a degree in counseling where they can be either clinical or school, and I'm more on the clinical side. So I also have, coming up on about 10 years of clinical experience working as a counselor. And I think one of the things that we think about with counseling, even me and my son were having a discussion yesterday. He's like, "Oh, mommy, all you do is talk. Why are you so tired?" Or all you do is listen. But, and I'm like, it's how hard it is to listen to people's problems all day and then share your own. But the thing that I wanted to get to him and everybody else is that what we do goes outside of the walls or even the virtual world, of counseling. It's more than just sitting and more than just talking. It is about advocating for our clients in so many different arenas. And I have 15 minutes here, so I'm gonna try to cover as much as I can. But one of the things that we do with our students coming in, and the thing I love about Ohio State is that social justice and advocacy are something that is stressed from day one. They come in, into our foundations course, and we're talking to them immediately about what is social justice and what does that look like and how can you, properly advocate and make sure that, speaking about equity for all of the clients that you're going to serve. A lot of the clients that we see, once they do graduate or even in the training purposes, they have insurance. So do they have, is it equitable? Can they come in and get, services such as someone else that may come from a more advantaged population? Or some that don't have insurance, are we willing to work with those individuals? So it really is about creating a platform for clients to be able to come in and feel secure when they do enter that setting, if they are able to. So what we do, we start with awareness. And I don't know if you all have heard about the social justice, multicultural social justice counseling competencies. And what that is, it speaks to 3 different levels: awareness, knowledge, and skill. And so I'll sit with the students. Day one, we sat and had a conversation, and I asked them, I said, pick, 3 different identities that kind of define who you are or more salient to you. And they, of course, over Zoom, it was a little bit different. They wrote them on a piece of paper. And so we went through each area of their life and talked about which of these identities reflect or most align with, that identity that's more salient to you. So for example, the neighborhood that you live in, and a lot of them, a lot of my students, as you all know, we don't have as much diversity as we would like to, but we're working on that. A lot of them are white females. So for them, they live around, other people that are white, not of color or not of any type of other lower socioeconomic status or anything like that. What does your religious community look like? What does your colleagues look like? And so for most of them, they realized that for their lives, they have been living in a bubble, so to speak, and they had not been exposed to a lot. So, when we talk about biases and awareness and knowledge, a lot of that awareness was lacking for them. So as an instructor, I like to meet them where they are. I don't want to just come in and hamp on them and say, well, you need to do this and you need to do that. But I more so want to look at, well, why aren't some of these things being done? And why aren't we looking at it from a whole worldview perspective? And that's from day one when they come in. We're talking about marginalized clients and how they may feel coming into a counseling setting, with a counselor, who's of a minority status and how they may respond or react to you. It really is about, when you think about social justice, it's about identifying, oppression and also acknowledging that it does exist. So for a lot of clients that we see, they feel, invalidated when we don't even discuss it. So when you come into the room and you're not discussing race or you're not discussing gender or you're not discussing any of the inequalities, and a lot of beginning counselors, they come in and they're afraid to talk about those things. They're afraid to talk about them because it shines a light on, shortcomings in their life or even lack of exposure to what they have not had before. And I let them know, it's okay to not know right now, because we can't control where you come from. We can't control how you grew up and where you were raised and what you were exposed to. But now that we're shining the light, you have the ability to gain all this knowledge. So let's start with that base. Let's start with the knowledge. Let's start with educating and start with, talking about developing different skills with working with different groups and things like that. So that's kind of, what we do. They learn how to validate their client concerns. A lot of times when a client comes in, you all know we had quite the summer with a lot of police brutality and a lot of the murders of innocent Blacks and things like that. So a lot of them will have clients come in or people that talk around them, they don't know what to say. And so what I stress, I say, well, just be honest. I'm a white female. I haven't experienced that before, but I'm here with you now and I want to learn. And it's to a person of color, that means so much. That means so much being able to hear that. And then we also speak about how they can own, some of the biases that they have and some of the privilege and opportunities that, were afforded to them. And in the counseling education department, Dr. Dollarhide has set us up to a degree where every class touches on social justice issues and multiculturalism. Every class touches on these issues. And so we work, from day one, influencing them and teaching them, well, once you do get to different levels, such as practicum and, experiences, that they're ready and they're armed with a plethora of information that can help them, continue to navigate their career. Speaking of practicum real quickly, trying to watch my time. I don't know how much time I have left, but as I mentioned, a lot of our student body comes in and they're, will be a white female. Okay, well, when we talk about practicum sites, this is where they're going to practice counseling. And they tell me, well, I lack culture and I don't know about diversity. So then maybe we should think about where we're going to put you in a practice setting. Some of them want to go to a suburban high school with all white students. And I'm like, well, if you do that, where are you really going to learn? Let's maybe think about where can we put you in practice so that you can learn to do some of these things. So practicum experiences. And the thing with social justice is by accepting clients who are different than us, you're already working and you're walking in that format. LGBTQ plus, women, racial minorities, ability, disability, impairment, elderly. A lot of these clients aren't welcomed in every setting within the counseling world. I have a lot of colleagues, in private practice, they have lists on, I will take this person, that person, or nope, I'm not dealing with that at all because it doesn't align with my values. And that's not something at counselors that we should do. So I let my practicum students know and internship students know, your job is to help everyone. And so by having that door open for opportunities for anyone to walk through it, you're already practicing social justice right there because you're giving them a space to come in and talk. We talk about not judgment. We're talking about, different things that they can do, learning about health disparities within counseling. We fight every year. There's a lot of legislation that's out there about equity for our clientele. Social workers get certain abilities to bill for certain things and counselors don't. So that means a whole plethora of clients we can't really see or give that information to. This year we saw the pandemic, a lot of clients lost insurance. So for those that maybe lost jobs or can't afford counseling, what are some things that we can do to promote, social justice activities? Well, one thing is that we can volunteer some of our hours and our time. And I'm not saying that, we don't need to eat 2, but 1 or 2 hours out of a day seeing a client who can't afford it, or giving them 30 minutes or something like that. Or what I'll do with a lot of my clients, they do work, but they have like high deductibles. I'll work with them. Let's talk about a fee for service here. What can you afford so that I'm not a bill, so that we can definitely make sure that you're getting the support that you need. Something else that comes to mind quickly, and I'll be done, just advocating for our clients. The pandemic witness, we all shut down. We went to virtual online. Well, a lot of my clientele can't afford smartphones. They can't afford computers. They can't afford these things. So how can we reach them on a different level? Besides them logging in and doing Zoom and all of that. Well, one way we talked about was maybe you can do some telehealth, which is strictly phone counseling. If you're comfortable with this, for some of them, we talked about how you can properly social distance and meet clients in person, wearing masks and just making sure that everyone feels safe. So there's a lot of different issues that we speak to, but the main thing is just really being aware of their own biases, gaining more knowledge and skill sets, and just really, normalizing this experience for their clients that oppression is real and it happens, and that in the counseling setting, they need to feel validated. Is that 15 minutes? Okay. I'm gonna make it 15, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I'm muted, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dustin has also agreed to be a part of the panel and talk about social justice from his perspective.
Good morning. It's good to see everybody. Thanks for taking time to be here today. And I'm excited to be able to talk a little bit about this important topic. And actually, Tanya, I appreciate what she said, because some of that's going to echo what I want to talk about in K-12. So to kind of frame it, I want to take us in a bit of a different direction, even though we're seeing some wonderful examples of advocacy for social justice. I want to talk a little bit more about what I think the barriers continue to be and how we can overcome them in K-12 settings, which connects to us in higher ed. So when I think about K-12, even though there's a long, long list of social justice issues, as Colette said in the very beginning, kind of some of the bigger ones are going to be like race, sexuality, politics, ability, class, gender. These are the things that you're going to see come up in schools, more so maybe than some other topics that might pertain more to society at large, or adults, et cetera. But to start, when I think about what are the bigger maybe deterrents or things that indirectly hold back social justice initiatives in K-12 settings, the number one, I think, are parents, and I mean this in a good way. But parents as individuals, we're all complicated, right? And you can be rational 99% of the time, but that 1% that pertains to your child, you have full permission to just completely lose your mind. And so that makes the work of K-12 challenging, because you're trying to thread a needle. And I can think of different examples over the years in my role in the principalship, et cetera, where a parent would be really, really upset because, actually, one example that came up was a parent was upset because we weren't talking enough about politics. And felt that students needed to be exposed to all the different nuances of politics. But the same parent called me 6 months later and was mad because her daughter came home, so they were talking about oral sex in health class. And so like it really gets to be challenging, because every family, every individual has a priority of what they feel is legit, and that's good as long as you stay in that lane. But as soon as you merge into another lane, so we might be okay talking about race, but we're not okay talking about gay marriage. And so that's where we're in this weird kind of, you're trying to balance, to please several different sources. So parents, although well-intentioned, I think when it comes to their kids, especially their kids as minors, they have very strong opinions about what they expect or what they want or don't want to see. And unfortunately, we're starting to hear more stories that this past election season, schools went silent. That they were like, we cannot engage in these conversations. It is much too tenuous. So a while ago, before high school, I was a middle school principal, and I just heard yesterday that they used to do a poll. Kids would vote. They'd have a mock election. They shut all of that down this year because they were just afraid that it would be too hot, from in the school and from a community perspective. So anyway, I think that parents continue to, have a strong voice in what's going on in their kids' lives, which can make K-12 educators and leaders be a little bit sheepish sometimes about pushing really important issues. The community, I think, also plays in a strong way to social justice issues in K-12. Most people don't know this, but just using the state of Ohio as an example, it is nothing to have 70% of your community not have school-age children. Even thriving suburbs, most people they don't think it's that high, but there's definitely more young families than not. But start thinking about the block that you live on, and it won't take long to be like, the Gimberts no longer have a school-age children, or the Beards no longer have school-age children, or the Dollarhides don't, so it doesn't take long, and that might be a badge of pride, right? Like, thank goodness they're done. But the point being that community members feel even more emboldened to bring up issues they don't like. I'm not saying that this is right, but when you have kids in school, retribution is a major, major concern of parents. If I heard it once, I heard it 100 times. I'm not happy about this teacher, but I don't want you saying anything because that teacher is going to take it out on my kid. Or my kid's not getting playing time, but I don't want you to tell the coach because then it's going to get taken out on my kid. Makes dealing with situations really challenging when you can't address them. But when you are a community member, you don't have kids in school, those community members are going to make their concerns known loudly if they don't agree with certain directions that schools are going in. And then the last piece of kind of the deterrent in the realm is actually, I think, a board of education. When you think about boards of education, they are elected to represent the communities in which they serve. And so they are charged with holding, the expectations of communities. And if they start moving in a direction that their community does not want the school district or believe the school district should be moving in, that's going to become politically tenuous, even if it's absolutely the right thing to do. And there's no question in the school world that, happy boards of education make for a happy superintendent. A happy superintendent makes for a happy principal. And if that balance is not aligned, if I'm a principal and I'm pushing a really, really important but challenging social justice issue, that's going to put my superintendent in a bad spot, which is going to put the Board of Education in a bad spot. And then sometimes the house of cards crumbles politically, even when the initiative was so drastically important. So I think that just kind of frames that there is well intention in K-12, but the politics of that world dealing with people's children, minors in a community that large in part do not have school-age children, makes things very difficult. But that being said, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the great things that I think are being done and things that we can continue to do better. And this is what's going to echo some of the things that Tanya talked about. First and foremost, I think I like what Tanya said, you're invalidated if things are not being discussed. And so students need to have an opportunity to express what they are thinking and feeling. And I think that school administrators and educators need to create a culture where students feel safe to talk about important issues. And I think this needs to be done qualitatively and quantitatively. Because if a student is scared to say something to the principal or to a teacher, they may feel more comfortable or safe saying it in a survey. But I also think focus groups, the opportunities to talk are extremely important. And we are seeing more and more examples in K-12 that weren't the case in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. You were there to kind of do your thing as a student, and we are the experts in the room. We're going to tell you how this goes. And I think that we're seeing a really positive change that students do have a voice. But again, it's on the adults to create that culture where students feel like they can speak up and be heard. Teachers, and this also kind of touches on what Tanya was saying, that teachers need to understand that representation matters. And so you have to know all of the students in your class, you have to know their walk of life, that they need representation. And for so long, I was a former high school English teacher. All we read were dead white guys, right? And that's a major problem. And you can't just throw in Langston Hughes and then feel good about yourself. You have to be very intentional about making sure that you have representation that represents the students in your class. And you're only going to know that if you take the time to get to know your students. I think then, this kind of ties into that, but then the curriculum development, you need to make sure that you're being thoughtful about what this looks like. What does the environment look like that you're creating so students can be engaging in a curriculum that is meaningful to them and what they're doing? I think teachers need to be students of social justice issues themselves. And I think Tanya's expression about just being honest, like, I can't relate to the experience, but I'm here, I stand with you, and I want to learn. That goes such a long way with adults. It goes even more with a kiddo, and so just being a student of social justice is important. And you can't master everything at one time. We probably could work our entire lives and still not master things. But just the willingness to keep learning and growing. So as a school administrator, I think you need to prioritize topics. Say, this year we're going to talk about race. We're going to do book studies. We're going to talk about how to incorporate this into our curriculum, all curriculum, not just the ones that seem to be the easy targets. Every part of our curriculum needs to incorporate race. And then maybe next year we're going to talk about gender, or the next year we're going to talk about LGBTQ plus issues. It needs to be part of the life. The last thing for teachers, they have to be assisted in becoming more comfortable in dealing with uncomfortable situations. Right now, the go-to is, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to go into having a student election this year because I'm afraid parents are going to get upset. Or I'm not going to talk about this particular issue because parents are going to get upset. I could almost tell you what time of the year it was, April, just in case you were wondering, that I would get phone calls about one of our teachers distributing, I think it's Peggy McIntosh, was an article from the late 60s. And I just knew it was going to happen. And it was very, very few, but there were parents who would get extremely upset about this discussion of white privilege in a classroom. And so we have to be comfortable in navigating those conversations and not just shut it down because it's a really important topic to be discussed. And I was, my phone fell. Okay, I got a few more minutes. All right. So then I think just to kind of complement what the teachers are doing, school leaders, again, school leaders, one, need to protect their teachers. Their teachers need to know that they can have these important conversations, that they can move some of these conversations forward, and that you will stand with them if things get a little bit tough. That's your job as a school leader. We need to continue to do more of that in our profession. I think that you need to be bringing your communities together as school leaders to talk about these important issues before they're hot topics. You should be talking about race long before we see some horrific situation like George Floyd and his murder in May. These conversations should be happening on the front end. What do we stand for? What do we believe? And the school leaders are best positioned to bring those stakeholders together. You need to continually be looking at curriculum audits, policy audits. Are we doing things indirectly that somehow limit, or as Colette was saying, it's the systems of oppression? That are we limiting our AP entrance to only certain students? And it's not just curriculum, it's also larger policy things. Most high schools, they still have traditional homecoming courts with a king and a queen. What message does that send, to students who might be transgender? Or just the simple fact that, it's something that maybe really has all kinds of hidden layers of implications that you're not seeing just based on your own experiences. So, I think as a school leader, you constantly need to be evaluating those things. Again, I mentioned this before, but prioritize teacher trainings. Make sure your teachers are in these issues, that they're grappling with them, that they're doing the hard work to get better at this, because as Tanya said, most of our educators are white females. So, that's another example where are we helping support them in their growth? And then the last part, higher education. This is where I think we can continue to do the best job we can, or possibly even better. And again, this was echoed with some of the things that Tanya and Colette said, but I think all of our degree programs need to have a social justice through line. And I think it needs to be intentional. I don't think it can be left up to individual instructors that maybe are talking about social justice issues, but maybe its terminology is different. All of our students in education need to walk out knowing exactly what these topics are and how best to combat them. I think whether it's embedded as a separate course or trainings, but the culturally responsive training, I think, is critically important for our educators. And I think, again, we've made good strides, but from a social justice perspective, we can continue to do better in that. I also think that how can we partner with K-12 districts to give them the data they need to have these hard conversations? So if a parent is really upset about a transgender student using a certain bathroom, that's when school leaders need higher ed to give them data that they can go to the policy conversations, et cetera. So how can we keep partnering with K-12 to help them with the empirical research or the information that they need? And then I think the last thing is we need to do a better job, at least I think from a leadership perspective, but also as an educator, in helping people understand the importance of moral courage. It's really hard to make good decisions when you're worried about losing your job, or politically going into the snake pit. Now you can't get the next job. And unfortunately, that moral courage starts to play at the intersection of doing what is right in politics. And we see a lot of good people make not good decisions when they're at that corner. Actually, Obama in his new our autobiography, it says, like, he talks about how there were times maybe that he was more timid than he would have liked to have been in making decisions, and I'm not using his eloquent words the same. But I think, how can we help educators and school leaders really understand what it's like to be at that crossroad and how to make the right decisions given the political pressures that come from that. So I'm afraid I probably went just a bit, 15 minutes and 46 seconds. Look at that. Look at that. So sorry if I rambled, but hopefully we'll have a chance for questions at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll make it a point to end in time for questions and comments, et cetera. So thank you, Dusty. That was a perfect segue into my part of this panel. I wanted to also, because some people joined us a little bit late, as well as the recording started a little bit later than my comments did. I wanted to just kind of come full circle that what we're talking about is social justice, and we're defining that as efforts to ensure that all persons have equitable access to the resources, opportunities, and life outcomes that are enjoyed by members of the dominant society. And in terms of what Tanya was talking about relative to that education process, the individual education process, and then Dusty spoke about the moral crossroads. What I would like to speak about is some research that I did on social justice identity, because it is interesting to me to understand how are we best able to foster development for individuals toward an appreciation and understanding and practice of social justice. So I interviewed, and so for those of you who are qualitative researchers, you'll recognize terminology, and if you're not, sorry, but it was a qualitative research, grounded theory study, talking to individuals who practice social justice, primarily within the counseling profession and the helping profession. And what we found among all of those individuals was there were predisposing factors, but they weren't all consistent. So it wasn't a case that only individuals who come from a pro-social justice family resulted in engaging in social justice work. There was a variety of different ways that people were awakened to the need for social justice in our society. Some personal experiences, some family experiences, and some professional experiences as they got as they were working in their profession and came to discover these inequities and become aware of these inequities in the systems in which they worked. However they came to this realization, they all experienced changes in 4 domains. Number one, they found meaning in the social justice work that they did. They found a sense of purpose, and they connected with that sense of purpose. Second, they described themselves as becoming more scrappy, more willing to engage in some of these difficult conversations, more willing to speak up when they witnessed oppression of other individuals, as well as willingness to speak up when they identify systems within their current environment that were oppressive. They also began to think differently about the world. They began to look with a critical lens at all of the assumptions that they held and the assumptions that were embedded within the systems that they worked. So they were willing to question. They were willing to come to a place of not knowing and being willing to push forward, to find answers, and then to continue that questioning and that critical process in order to foster other people's thinking toward a more critical vision of the system in which they were embedded. And finally, they had profound changes in their context, in their relationships. And what they described, and this was something that I see over and over again, because I'm president of Counselors for Social Justice, the national organization, and the need for a like-minded community was critical for all of these individuals. And I continue to see how important that is among practitioners who are committed to social justice, because it can be fatiguing. Certainly individuals who live with oppression on a daily basis, they talk about racial battle fatigue. They talk about the constant sense of trauma, the hypervigilance, the concern about whether or not they are being accepted, whether or not they need to code switch. Those kinds of considerations all of us need to be aware of. But when we engage in social justice work, we step into that battle sometimes. We step into a place of discomfort. And so having persons around us who appreciate that work, who understand that work, that is very, very important. And that can keep our energy going. And what I found also is that as people continued in their social justice work, they started to adopt and articulate a social justice identity. So it wasn't, oh, I understand multiculturalism. They were willing more and more often to express those critiques, to question those systems, to advance concerns about equity and whether or not they were seeing racism, homophobia, sizeism, ableism, sexism, whether or not they were seeing it, they were calling it, they were naming it. And all of those actions, whether it was on a small scale or a big scale, all of those actions contributed to this energy that they expressed. And one person, and I love this quote, one of the people we interviewed said, "I can't not do this. In all good conscience, I cannot live with myself if I am not doing this work." And what I would invite all of us to consider is, how do we help all of our students to feel that sense of moral obligation, that sense of outrage, that sense of I can't unsee this. I have to speak about this. I see it, I have to speak about it, and do that in a way that is aware of those political realities, absolutely, and in a way that brings others along with us, that energizes others, that inspires others, so that we are no longer the only voice, but we are linking arms with all of the individuals to get into good trouble, right? To get into necessary trouble, because that's the only way we move forward. The only way we move forward is together. So that is kind of the end of my comments. We'll open it up for questions or comments, experiences where you've seen social justice and you've practiced it and how that has impacted your life. Any of those kinds of experiences that you would like to share, we would love to hear.
Thank you, Colette and Dusty and Tanya. That was wonderful. And yes, we're going to open up for further conversation and discussion. I just had a flashback moment, you know, K-12, when Dusty was talking K-12, and the things that were real and powerful, impacting then, are still, and even in higher ed. So I've been able to carry some interesting, how do I say this? Some interesting awarenesses, let me put it that way, from the K-12 world into higher ed. One is around culture and climate, and that moral courage, that ethical piece that you talked about. Even just in changing the culture at the K-12 level, when I was working in an inner city school, and these children, you spoke about it, but these children were looking at, you know, white inventors, white mathematicians, and I was like, enough of this. So I Googled who are these people, and we hung little pictures with stories on the back from the ceiling and put them on the wall so that they could visit around the room and just learn about who are Black inventors, who are Black mathematicians, who are Black musicians, who are Black chemists. Saw the same thing when I did a study in Southern California. They had almost the exact same model, only with Latina and Latino inventors. And so you have to understand the culture that you're in so that people can identify, going back to your identity, I want to be able to help people identify with that domain and themselves, seeing themselves in that domain so that they can connect. And I've been able to do that even in higher ed. And it's been really interesting and fun because, as you said, I'm kind of shocked sometimes. Although we do serve a predominant population of white females in education, there are also white men and ed men who really don't have a connection with the community that they're getting ready to serve. So teaching them about how do you connect with a community that's not of your own background has been enlightening and wonderful and inspiring for me, even personally as an educator. So thank you for that. That was really fun. Miriam, I have one question. I'm a little concerned about you. There is a single red chair behind you and what looks like padded walls. Are you okay, my friend?
Yeah, I'm in my basement, and that's my a kid's chair for my grandchildren when they come to visit. So yeah.
So you put your grandchildren in a padded room?
This is actually a hand painted chair. I don't know if you can see, and my basement is does it look padded? I don't know. But yeah, I was thinking about it when I look for quiet places to Zoom when it's going to be interactive, and this is like nobody's. I have a kid still at home, adult kid doing a master, so he's on Zoom. My husband's on Zoom, yeah, so thanks. I'm like, nobody bothers me down here. But I actually thought of it. Maybe I should dress up, dress up a little bit.
No, I'm teasing you. I just want to make sure you're in a good space, my friend. That's all.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to share?
I wanted to just really quickly say one thing really quick. We are in the final process of creating a certificate in anti-racism in education. And so we're hoping to have it on the books for fall. So it'll be a graduate level 4-course certificate. So I just wanted to mention that as you're thinking about your social justice work with your students. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Commercial moment is over.
One of the things, thank you. Thanks to all of you on the panel. I really appreciate it. One of the things that, is the measure from a school administrator's perspective is what happened on the ground. How was it changed? What specific things could you see? And a thing that I would like to pass on that I think is so critical for those of you who hope to see change in particularly pre-K-12, because that's what I understand, but I think it also applies to higher ed, is that administrators, and speaking back to the moral courage thing that Dusty mentioned, I think most administrators have moral courage, but they don't feel supported. And let me tell you what happens, the reality of what happens. When there's snow on the ground, the phone starts ringing about, when are you going to start closing school? It doesn't ring about, are you going to keep school open? And when we have issues of COVID, the phone starts ringing from those parents who are very concerned about their kids getting sick in school. It doesn't start ringing from the people who want school, although we've seen examples of that. And when there is a textbook that's being used, the phone starts ringing about, why is that textbook being used? And when there are new initiatives, the phone starts ringing. Now, the administrator, whether it's one of the 6,000 building level administrators in Ohio, or one of the 1,000 superintendents running the district, those people make decisions. And they make decisions mostly based on pressure. They would like to make the decision on moral courage, but they don't feel anybody standing behind. The people who really are kind of supporting the superintendent, they don't say anything. They don't step up. And so consequently, the schools do get closed on snow days. The schools do get closed in COVID. The textbook does get removed. The program does. I'll use an example on Melissa. She had a program in Worthington that had tremendous pressure to eliminate that program. She stood her ground. She had some support from people who stood with her, but it was not pleasant to stand your ground. And so the bottom line to the message is that if you really want to see something happen, if you want to be able to point to a concrete example, then you have to support the people who are trying to hold the ground to make that happen. And so that applies to every aspect of diversity. It happened in the late 60s and 70s with children who are handicapped and special needs. It happened in the 80s for women in Title IX. It continues to happen. And so my point is that we have to speak up, and then we can see real change.
Thank you, Jack. Anyone else, comments, experiences you'd like to share? Okay, Elisa.
I would like to go, Dr. Beard. It's Elisa. Oh, I'm real loud. I'm sorry, y'all. Hey, hi, hi, everyone. I get excited. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for the help. You know, it's Friday, and I'm excited. Thank you, first and foremost, for holding this space and this conversation. I get excited about when we have these conversations. And with that being said, I'm also tired of talking about it. And that's just me being real. And, you know, I think I would love to see action. And what are we doing? Like, what are sort of the tangible results that we are doing and creating in our own department? And so what came to mind for me was like, what are individual programs doing to support students? So, you know, you know, is it in the curriculum? Like, I really love the point of Dusty talking about, like, you know, not just throwing in Langston Hughes, you know, in the curriculum, but like, what are your core classes are you teaching your students, like your current administrators, your current students going into the field that, you know, incorporates, you know, language of inclusion, diversity, whether it's, you know, different articles, things like that can really give a breadth and depth of different scholars. I think that's important. I think for me being a new doctoral student, I look for those things and seeing a different perspective. I think that's really important for our students. And so, you know, it's something that, just to kind of wrap up this thought, it's been really like in these conversations, really thinking about that. And I said, yeah, it can really start with our curriculum. It can start at, you know, we're doing changes right now with, you know, what does that look like for our students? And, you know, if we're really sort of, you know, bringing up the next generation of administrators and educators, you know, what are we really truly doing? Are we really preparing them for, you know, good trouble, as Dr. Dollarhide Colette alluded to? And, you know, our students really getting that information from their programs. And I can say from my master's program, I didn't talk about critical race theory. You know, that was just not part of, like, it's a big thing in higher education, but I never had the opportunity to talk about it, you know? And so I think there's things that we can do as a department, you know, just real small steps that we can advocate for. But I'll end there. So I wanted to open it up. But again, thank you for the conversation. I get really excited. Happy Friday, everybody.
Thank you, Lisa. I will tell you, in terms of curriculum and how to begin to tweak a curriculum towards opening up for new perspectives and thought, a great way to do that is through case studies. Also, the empirical work that Dusty was speaking about early on is important, but just thinking about the curriculum beyond just what's in the textbook. What is the cultural curriculum? That's what I was speaking to earlier about, you know, making sure people understand the persons and the community that they're serving, and is there an identity connection? Working towards that identity connection. So one of my favorite all-time go-to is Steele, you know, and I make sure that my students are exposed to him at least twice, almost in every class. So, you know, just so that they have some awareness of what identity in education and how that impacts life trajectory, how that impacts your thinking about yourself and your identification with academics. So thank you for that. That was great. Anyone else want to add to what you're doing? Go ahead, Miriam.
Hi. So I've been working on Holocaust education, and I've been collaborating with the Buchenwald Memorial Foundation. I visited there, and I have kind of people I've been working with on a film. And recently, I was kind of shocked to find out that the new director is a historian, and he wrote about the Wehrmacht, and he was sued in Germany for daring to attack that subject. Brand new. I think the suit was dropped because apparently there was outcry. But when I heard that, I kind of thought, oh, like I thought that battle was fought, I didn't even think that was possible. The other thing I found out is there are people who visit the Buchenwald Memorial. I've been there, I've participated in some of their ceremonies. They have a very, very strong educational program. There are people more and more who visit schools and leave nasty comments in the books, which I'm not sure happened before either. I haven't researched this particular topic. I'm doing more like case studies of rescuers and pedagogical processes in terms of teaching about the Holocaust. So I haven't researched, what comments are left in the books of the Buchenwald Memorial, but I understand that that didn't happen years ago either. And now it's a thing that people come and, say this didn't happen, or, this is made up, or this is, some kind of nasty comment. So that's kind of my recent shock in doing this work. And that's not even talking about, Holocaust education here, or, how it's implemented into curriculum in terms of, teaching about what happens when, tolerance disappears, or all of that. So that's going to be depressing. Sorry.
I look forward to engaging your work when we get to religious diversity. I would like to send an invitation at some point to have you share a little bit more, because that's one aspect that was brought up, but not with enough vigor. I want to bring that conversation full circle. Thank you. Christina, you're giving a thumbs up. Is there something you would like to share?
I just wanted to say I agree with that. I would like to learn more, in the future on that piece. So I was saying thumbs up. I agree with that.
Thank you. Well, if everyone is at peace, I think we can move forward. I want to thank you all for coming again and supporting the diversity series. Thank you for allowing my absence last time that we met, our first meeting. Actually, this was our first panel, and Colette, I'm so glad it was in the hands of you and Dusty and Tanya. Thank you so much. The plan is moving forward that we will have a speaker and a panel each month. So January, it was interesting, it was brought up, the racial battle fatigue. In January, we will hear from Stephen Quay regarding racial battle fatigue. And then we will also have a panel. And then in February, we're looking at methodology diversity. So to Colette's point, learn the language of both, because we live in both worlds. So I really look forward to continuing planning for the year, and you will get more information as it rolls out as we finish our planning. Also at 1 o'clock today, of course, and the first Friday of every month, we have our diversity committee. You're all welcome to join. But I just thank you for your participation in this conversation. This was fun. And I agree, someone says it's a great way to end the week. I needed it to end it on a positive note. This one was exhausting for so many reasons I can't tell you. If there's anything else for the good of the order, I welcome you to share. If not, we'll say a peaceful goodbye, and I wish you all a wonderful holiday and a restful holiday so that we can all come back, and my God, it'll be 2021. Right. Thank you so much, everybody.